Okay, everybody, so I believe I owe Plato a little bit of an apology because it appears that some of his numbers are checking out here. What was confusing about Plato is that he said it was the size of Libya and Spain combined. However, you got to realize that a long time ago that those areas he was describing may not be the same as far as landmass goes that we see today. So basically what he says is at the top here, he says that it was a naval power lying in front of the Pillars of Hercules. And when I go back over here, what I see is that these are the Pillars of Hercules right here. So the naval power of Atlantis basically existed out in here. But when he goes into talking about the land mass, he actually gives some numbers that check out pretty nicely. What he says is that the Egyptians, Plato asserted, described Atlantis as an island comprising mostly of mountains in the northern portions and along the shore, and encompassing a great plain of an oblong shape in the south, extending in one direction 3,555 kilometers, but across the center inland it was 2,370 kilometers. And so when I take a look at this, what I see is the following. Okay, he basically gave us a square area of where Atlantis existed. When I do a ruler measurement from this oblong shape in the south, which was a plane, which actually if you fly over this thing and you take a look at it, what you'll notice is it's very flat. Okay, and if I draw it from there all the way down to what they call the Plato Seamount, and I take a look, what I get is about 396 kilometers. So that means that when he talks about 370 kilometers here, okay, then I think that's what he's giving us the vertical, the vertical length of how it was. And then when he goes in, he talks about the other part of it being 555 kilometers. Then if I do another ruler, say from here out this way, then 555 kilometers is roughly here. Okay, that's, gosh, it's roughly here. That's 552. So what I think he's really talking about is the area that encompasses Atlantis is basically this area. Okay? This is basically Atlantis. Now what you see here is the polygon that I drew. I put it at an absolute position or an absolute altitude. And that way I could move it up and down. And you can see that if you move this thing up and down, basically what the altitude was. And so at one point, basically the shoreline, as you can see, basically encompassed this grid area, and the shoreline on this side was this area right here. So this basically is almost a perfect description of what Plato described as the area, the area that it existed. And so although this is the naval area over here that they were guarding, what they did was they put their land over here on this right side. Now, in addition, what he does is he goes down here and he talks about Poseidon, and he says that he carved the mountain where his love dwelt into a place enclosed with 3 circular moats of increasing width, varying from 1 to 3 stadia and separated by rings of land proportional in size. And then they built bridges northward from the mountain, making a route to the rest of the island. So I think what he's maybe talking about when he talks about these rings of land is I think he could be talking about this area right here. And he's talking about these mountains. He's talking about these mountains that went from this area. So here's what I think. Okay, this is where the Populace existed. This is where the palace was, where the headquarters was, right over here, the main area. This was where the power was, and this is where the people were, and it all sat on a shore, and the naval power was over here. And so with that respect, what we have is we have a match that it seems like from Kircher and Plato. And I like Plato's numbers. They make a lot of sense with what I'm seeing right here. This grid is definitely not natural. It's not like the uniform grids you see in Google Sky. This actually has some human-type imperfections in it. And so I think this was the city. I think this was probably where the castle or palace or headquarters was right over here. And then the rest of this area out here was the naval stuff. So I owe Plato a little bit of an apology there. And I think that the size that he was given when he compared it to continents, we have to probably take into some other considerations there. But when he actually gave the numbers so that I could put a square around it, it's all making a lot more sense now. So folks, this is definitely the Atlantis area. Kircher took us here, but this right here, this is where Atlantis was. So I hope that helps everybody, and I'll talk to you soon.